This is Democracy Now! I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez as we turn to Minnesota, where a massive fight against the Enbridge Line 3 pipelines brewing after the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers approved a permit for the project this week. Pipeline construction is now set to begin by the end of the month, despite years of resistance and the concerns of Indigenous communities who say it would violate tribal sovereignty and contaminate land and water. Construction could also bring thousands of temporary workers to Minnesota, even as COVID-19 cases are spiking in the state. The controversial proposed pipeline would carry tar sands oil from Alberta, Canada, to a terminal in Superior, Wisconsin, cutting through Indigenous territory in Minnesota and running under more than 200 streams. As Native and climate activists prepare to resist the pipeline's construction, they say they fear militarized tactics like those seen at Standing Rock at the mass protests against the Dakota Access Pipeline in 2016. In response to these concerns, the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission has forbidden Enbridge from, quote, engaging in counterinsurgency tactics or misinformation campaigns designed to interfere with the public's legal exercise of constitutional rights. But advocates say they've already faced counterinsurgency tactics by the police and private security. For more, we go to Sioux City, Iowa, where we're joined by Tara Houska, Indigenous lawyer and activist, founder of the Giniw Collective. She is Ojibwe from the Couchiching First Nation. Welcome back to Democracy Now!, Tara. Talk about what's happening this week, your concerns about Enbridge and what the protests are all about.
Yeah, this week we saw the Trump administration do exactly what we thought they would do, which was approve the last final major hurdle for Enbridge to begin construction of Line 3. It's been a long 7-year fight against this particular project in the regulatory process and the legal processes. And we thought maybe that Minnesota, with its Democratic leadership, would do something different. But it turns out they are apparently not as brave as Governor Whitmer over in Michigan and are willing to put our children's futures on the line to allow through a Canadian corporation to do as it wishes and to suppress the rights of our citizens, including surveillance, militarization of law enforcement, direct payments to law enforcement. I mean, that's what's happening on the ground.
And could you talk about Enbridge, the Canadian company, for those of our viewers and listeners who don't know about it?
Yeah, sure. Enbridge is, the largest pipeline infrastructure company in North America. It is a massive company that is directly tied to the continuation and perpetuation of the tar sands industry. Tar sands is the dirtiest fossil fuel in the world. It's pulled out of the ground up in Alberta, Canada. It is one of 3 projects that I'm working on. The Line 3 project, it's also tied to Keystone XL and the Trans Mountain Pipeline over in British Columbia. Those are the last 3 major tar sands lines that are proposed. All the others have been canceled due to resistance on the ground, particularly Indigenous-led resistance. Enbridge has a long history of spills. It's responsible for the largest inland spill in U.S. history over in the Kalamazoo River in Michigan. So they have a long history of causing pretty serious destructive damage to the environment.
And besides the environmental threat, isn't there also the threat of having hundreds of temporary workers from across the United States in the region in construction during the pandemic, especially given the enormous toll that the pandemic has taken on Indigenous communities?
Yeah, we're talking numbers in Minnesota that are now 1 in 10. That's how many people are sick in this area. Right next door to us in North Dakota, 1 in 1,000 people have passed away from COVID-19. It's one of the worst places in the entire world that's been hit by this pandemic. And we're already seeing out-of-state plates all over in rural northern Minnesota. We can notice when people are not from the area. It's a small, remote place. That's the communities that are along the line. We're talking some counties with maybe 1 or 2 or no ICU beds. It is a situation where you're just kind of throwing a match into an existing pandemic we're talking about Thanksgiving or, Truthsgiving or whatever it happens to be, depending on how your understanding of it is. But the governor has said you can't gather with your family. But yet they're bringing in, thousands of temporary workers to build this oil pipeline. So where's the actual concern for public health?
And what about the counterinsurgency issues that have been raised?
I mean, I saw that counterinsurgency language. I'm not exactly sure what the Public Utility Commission thinks counterinsurgency is, because we've already been heavily surveilled. We are being heavily surveilled. There's been reports now of Customs Border Patrol drones that we've seen over our encampment on private land. We knew that was happening. There are people that are surveilling and targeting individual citizens, including myself, including others that have been leaders in this particular fight. There's militarization of law enforcement all along the line, purchases of riot gear, bringing in of MRAPs and all kinds of other militarized force. Can only presume has to do with the Line 3 struggle. The sheriff of Hubbard County, where our encampment is located about 200 yards off the line, openly accepted a bunch of equipment like bolt cutters and chains and all that stuff from Enbridge directly with a truckload pulled up to the sheriff's station, and admitted to that. Said, yeah, of course we did. It was free. I mean, that's where we're at.
And just last week, as I understand, 2 water protectors locked themselves to Enbridge Line 3 excavators blocking active construction of pump stations. Could you talk about the ongoing actions of resistance that have been occurring and that you expect will occur?
Yeah, as soon as they started building Line 3 around the state of Minnesota, there was a encampment that was formed back in 2018 when the line was initially improved by the Public Utility Commission in Minnesota. And so there's been a series of ongoing actions against transmission lines, pump stations, all the pre-construction, which really is the same type of destructive damage into the wetlands and into these protected places. That's now only upticking. I mean, there's hundreds of excavators all over, scattered over northern Minnesota. And in the meantime, there's been hundreds and thousands of people that have been training, preparing, and building community together, recognizing that our freedom and our bodies are something that's going to be needed in this long fight against the fossil fuel industry and against the destruction of our only home.
Tara, your final thoughts on this day before Thanksgiving that you'd like to share with people, and also the push for Deb Haaland, the Congress member from New Mexico, to be the first Native American Secretary of the Interior.
It's a moment where I think a lot of folks are maybe starting to wake up to the idea that those construction paper headdresses and Pilgrims and Indian stories really aren't all that we were taught in school. That there were actually a series of massacres and broken promises that have occurred with the onset of colonization, and that it's not quite so rosy as our children are led to believe. And so I hope that we are able to, come together with our families if we are able to be with our families, or be together through virtual means or whatever it happens to be, and tell some truth about what the real story is and how we learn from that and move forward together. That includes something like appointing Deb Haaland to the Secretary of the Interior position, overseeing Native affairs. Imagine having a Native person actually overseeing Native affairs for the first time in U.S. history.
Tara Houska, we want to thank you so much for being with us. Indigenous lawyer and activist, founder of the Giniw Collective. She is Ojibwe from the Couchiching First Nation. And tune in tomorrow for our holiday special with Jody Archambault of Standing Rock, Ali Young in Arizona, Bree Newsom and Eddie Glaude, as well as Juan Gonzalez and Latino results from the election. And Friday, we re-air our documentary 4 Days in Western Sahara, Africa's Last Colony. That does it for our show. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. Stay safe, wear a mask.